I am now going to ask that perhaps we introduce ourselves, what we are doing.
I'm Philip Mukwena, also enrolled for the master's program with a special focus on my topic at the moment. It's really focusing on critically analyzing the constitutionalism and indigenous participation in addressing environmental racism in South Africa and Brazil. So it's a comparative kind of a study that I want to explore, looking at how law has been applied in both South Africa and Brazil to address issues around environmental racism. But at the same time, because it's a new kind of a word that I'm exploring in terms of trying to define what is environmental racism on my end. It's quite an interesting topic that I'm really trying to explore with the colleagues. Fortunate, at least today, after a struggle in the past 3 months trying to find a supervisor. So today, at least I've managed to secure a supervisor and a co-supervisor. So I'm in the process of finalizing, the MOU with both the supervisor and the main supervisor and the co-supervisor. But really, the main key focus of my research topic is just wanting to explore kind of 3 research questions on my side. One, really more around how South Africa and Brazil constitutionalize environmental rights in relation to indigenous groups, and definitely indigenous groups on my side. I think in South Africa context, it's really looking at those groups or communities that have been excluded or their rights being taken away in terms of by predominantly like the industries, which has resulted to the end that they are not being able to fully utilize the land that they have for their either commercial or any other processes that they want to have. And then in the Brazil context, it's really focusing much with the communities from the favelas, those that were kind of exposed or they're exposed to slavery, and how Brazilian laws has kind of provided a legal framework to first recognize them officially as citizens, if they are recognized, and then secondly, how they are able to access land without big industries taking it over for profiting. And then the second part of the research question is really looking at to what extent participation in policies and legal framework works between the two countries. And then the last part is really drawing strengths around constitutionalism and participation in addressing kind of environmental racism between the two countries. So it's still at the early stages. So I do have like a draft proposal that I've submitted, but it still needs to be further refined, I think, as soon as I get in touch with the supervisors on my side. So that's all from my end.
Okay, so which department or which school is that are you doing this with?
International law.
Okay, all right. I'll come back to the conversation. Let me hear. Thank you very much, Philip. Let's hear. Okay, Kolofelo, go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kolofelo Hofelo. So my research is under the public and constitutional and international law, and I will be analyzing and discovering on gender-based violence, analyzing it as a pandemic as it was declared. And also I will be focusing on the impact of legislation, as well as the challenges and gaps that are there in terms of enforcement. So as I am already working in a GBV space, I believe this is a topic for me that was closer to my heart, and that I've also had questions regarding the legislation, the implementation, and I feel that, you know, it was necessary for me to dive into that space. I'm a bit nervous because I don't know what's happening. I hear people talking about supervisors, and I still need to also explore what that is about. And thank you so much. I'm glad to be here and to hear everyone's voices.
My name is Anwar Jessup. I'm an attorney from KZN in Ladysmith specifically. I've registered for my LLM. It's the first time I'm actually doing this. So I'm also like Ofelo, a little bit at a loss because I just sent a topic outline to Professor Baka, I believe, in private law. This is a LLM dissertation in private law. My topic basically is on the legal and practical challenges in the administration and conveyancing of deceased estates and trust in South African private law. The purpose of the research is to deal with the statutory and procedural framework governing the transfer of immovable property from deceased estates and trusts in South Africa, and the complexities that one finds from a practical aspect when dealing with the master's offices and our local municipalities, and the impact it has on the more disadvantaged heirs and beneficiaries insofar as estates and trusts are concerned. So I've basically put together a 3 or 4 page topic outline. And just today, I addressed an email to Professor Baka to inquire whether that topic is viable and asking him for further guidance. Unfortunately, I received an email saying that he's not available, but I believe this was sent through to the perhaps other supervisors that will be looking at this. So I'm just waiting for them to advise me as to whether the topic is viable or to help me to refine it and give me guidance as far as this is concerned.
Okay. What is the topic, Jessup? We will talk about it, but I just want to get a sense.
All right. It's basically, the topic here is the legal and practical challenges in the administration and conveyancing of deceased estates and trusts in South African private law.
Okay. So what would you like to inquire about or to investigate about that?
To investigate and look at methods and in which it can become more the system can be more user friendly in terms of enabling us to be able to effect transfers of these properties to respective heirs and beneficiaries, because legislation says that you've got to follow a particular procedure in terms of the law, but the practicality is not married to the legislation. In other words, there's this disparity, and it's a growing disparity, because practically what you are doing is trying to get these properties transferred, but we are picking up huge hurdles in practice with the master's offices, and more importantly, even with municipalities, and when you're dealing with indigents and you're dealing with disadvantaged groups who are finding difficulty in having their properties transferred, particularly people from rural areas and the elderly and so on. And we found that this is a problem in practice, actually. And because of the difficulties with the master's office and the red tape that's being, that one has to follow, it's creating a huge sort of stagnation in the transfer process of these properties. And then that prejudices, the heirs and beneficiaries as such.
My name is Nompilo, and I am first-year master's student. My topic is based on the degradation of the evidence, the factors that contribute to the evidence being degraded. So still busy with the topic with my supervisor, and I have a present supervisor like me. So I'm still busy. So I'm not sure if it's still gonna continue like this, or we're still gonna change the topic. We're still on that phase, but my topic is more based on the forensic evidence and the degradation of the evidence that we get on the crime scene. And yeah, that's what I can share for now.
What triggered your interest in that, Nombilo?
I just got interested to the topic because, okay, in terms of the like DNA, if ever maybe there was like a rape and then they collected the DNA, the evidence, all of that, when they store that evidence, I get so curious. Is it, if we test it like same time, and then if we test it after like 2 weeks, is this, we are still gonna get the same results, or what? Are we able to get the justice that we need for people in terms of the evidence that we collect from the crime scenes? So I was so curious on that, on the storage of the evidence that we collect and how we collect that evidence and how we store that evidence.
Yeah. What is your assumption though on all of those curiosity? What do you think? I'm saying your assumption because
yes,
I want to start using hypothesis.
Okay. No, I feel like the way we store evidence, with the transportation of the evidence and the storage, and maybe adding with the equipment we have, I doubt I doubt we get like accurate results.
Oh, you've got your you've got your doubts that perhaps in the collection, the analysis, the storage, and everything else, the whole protocol.
Yes, I feel like there's a gap.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, you might be right. What if you are right?
I guess so. I'm just kidding. But yeah, I got so curious on that. If the justice that we say we serve, are there people that maybe get arrested because of such things? Are we able to prove it correctly on our side? Yes.
All right. Get all of you now, you need to get ready with your own proposals, because I think they are all, of interest to me at least. And it's going to be a very interesting conversation, because I'm going to keep on just coming back to your proposal so that it can be more, we can make sense out of it ourselves. So you're all welcome. As I said at the beginning, for those of you who might have joined, slightly a few minutes late, there is nothing that you're going to gain unless you participate and you contribute from your own research. Because at the end of the day, it's you who need to understand the research that you want to do, and obviously participate and engage so that you can enrich this learning. So that is how it works. And I'm already picking up that there is a lot of good work that is happening with you. And I think this therefore should be the platform to enrich that work, but also to learn from each other. So you're all welcome. And I'm looking forward to meeting with you, at least as occasionally as it will, our schedule will permit. Now, how we normally do the work is that, as you can imagine, we come with prepared. What is the word I'm looking for? We all come with something that is already prepared. Now, we come prepared with theories, and as you can imagine, we come prepared to say, in an event that Jesop is not going to speak, we need to find something to talk about. But this is just to guide our conversation. Now, what I thought today we'll look at is just to really navigate around some of the concepts of research. We are not doing this in order to make you regurgitate them, because that's really not the point. The point is just for you to understand them contextually with the work that you are doing, your research project. So as a researcher, it's important to also have a view of what is guiding, what are the theoretical and the philosophical underpinnings of your research. So so that's the basis upon which today we're going to have to discuss this. But as we're discussing them, they will have no meaning to me if you are not able to locate them from the work or from the research that you are about to do or you are doing or you're intending to do. And please always remember, this is a platform to guide you, and your supervisor is always going to give you a lot more than what this platform will give you. But it's important for you to take these lessons and this learning and look at it in the context of your proposal. Now, I had to make some adjustments from what you are saying when you started, because I think all of you are talking about topic and the fact that the supervisor is appointed, is still to be appointed, just recently being appointed. Now I thought, okay, let's just hoy in a little bit of some guidelines on how to choose a research topic, because you have already chosen the research topic, and I want to sort of just reflect on how it has evolved in your case. And please pardon me, because this is now off the script, as they would say, but there is nothing that stops you from using any other sources to come to choosing your own topic. For example, I think I had somebody saying, I chose this because I am in the space. That already justifies the reason why you're choosing the topic. I'm in this space. I'm a lawyer. I'm an attorney. Therefore, I'm in this space as well. So these are the kind of issues that I observe. So already it gives you an advantage of why did you choose the topic that you've chosen. Because it's always going to be important for you to know why you're choosing the topic that you're choosing, so that at the point at which you start to investigate or to collect data, to analyze data, and to write a report about it, it must be something that is at least familiar to you as a sign. Now we are saying here, these are just guidelines. So please do whatever you want with them, because it's just to guide you. The first thing we say, look around you. I'm an attorney going to court all the time, engaging the courts, and I'm picking up that there are issues that perhaps questions that need some answers. They're everywhere. Whenever you go to court, whenever you are in a GBV space, the laws that are to be implemented. And I was hearing the constitutionalism, the Brazil and the South African indigenous people. There are always things everywhere that you are able to pick up. So there will be no one, ladies and gentlemen, who will ever say, I've got no topic. It's just about what is of interest to you. Secondly, once you have an idea of what you want to do, from a topic or from a problem that you want a solution for, or a question that you want answers for, you need to read existing literature about that. So you're always going to find that what is of interest to you, somebody might have been like you and they might have done some work, or more people would have done some work on it. So all you need to do is to find out what are the things that are already known and the things that are already believed about your chosen topic or the problem that you are trying to solve. Who had interest in it and how did they go about trying to solve it, and how did they solve it if they did solve it? And is that solution still, as we speak today, relevant, or are there some gaps that perhaps I see my study or my inquiry about to close or to solve it as per the developments of today as opposed to 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago? You need to seek advice of experts. I mean, when you engage your supervisor, you need to be open-minded about it, because what that would mean is, as they advise you, they are strengthening your proposal. So an advice is not meant to really look down or to undermine the work that you have done with your proposal. Is to strengthen your proposal. There are questions that you can ask an expert, or can be asked. Question like, what needs to be done? So when you are engaging like in this conversation, somebody would say, but then what needs to be done about this? What needs to be done about the Madlanga Commission? What needs to be done about Brazil-South Africa relations? What needs to be done? What burning questions are still out there? There is always going to be a question or questions that have not been answered in a research space that will always be lingering. And you can walk in there and say, these are the questions that I would like to answer. And when you talk to an expert, they will always tell you what are the questions that have not been answered, for which then you can also formulate your research around those questions. What are the previous research findings that didn't make sense at the time? For example, if you are dealing with the issues around the indigenous communities of South Africa and the indigenous communities of Brazil, what were the questions at the time, or what were the findings at the time that you think today did not make sense, but maybe they made sense then? Because remember, with time, certain things look a little bit odd than they would have been at the time that you're referring to. So things that happened 20, 30 years ago, when you're asked today, 30 years later, they look strange and odd and weird in some circumstances, because it's almost like, but why did you have to write down all these 30 pages with a pen and paper when you could have just asked AI to do it for you? So on hindsight, sometimes some of these questions are they are strange, and you just have to understand that from an expert discussion that can also assist you in formulating your research topic. If you can, you need to attend conferences, because researchers have great success finding new research projects at conferences. So if you attend conferences, you'll almost always find people who are like you. So it gives you an opportunity to network. It gives you an opportunity to ask questions. It gives you an opportunity to share ideas and exchange some contacts with other researchers. And what does that do? That then just improves on your ability and to network with people that are having similar kind of challenges that you are trying to deal with as well. Now, another guideline is that the fifth one is that you can choose a topic that intrigues and motivates you. Again, be mindful of that. Some research projects take long. So you don't want to find yourself along the way feeling bored and not finishing your project. That is one of the reasons why you are advised to take something that is intriguing to you and that is of interest to you, so that it also sustains you should your project take longer time. Now, as you read professional literature, as you attend conferences, and as you talk with experts, you will uncover a number of potential research problems. Because during the conversation, you are able to say, oh my goodness, this is what I thought it is, but I think I'm more interested with this or that and the other. So at some point, though, you need to pick just one of them. So you can't consult and engage on all these issues, infinito. You need to get to a point where you say, well, I think right now, this is where I want to get in. Choose a topic that others will find interesting and worthy of your attention. Again, not only should it intrigue you or interest you, you need to also look at whether the chosen topic is going to be found interesting. You can talk to your peers, your family, your friends, your colleagues, and people around you. Now, they'll be able to, you can gauge their sense of interest, because you don't do research just so that it's research done and it filed. You do research that can add value to the body of knowledge in the discipline that you find yourself in. So the work that you are doing, some of which will change the way we look at things, some of which can change policy, practices, some of which can really redirect the way human beings consume this social world that we live in. So you need to choose a topic that if there's going to be an audience, a big audience, that you are going to confront yourself, that you are going to present your findings with, are able to find your research project invigorating, not only interesting, but also worthy of their own attention. So be realistic about what you also can accomplish. It is always going to be very interesting that, it's very interesting sometimes that, when you are a researcher and you don't have sufficient experience, you become more ambitious. You want to do a lot more than what you can sort of afford. Now, this is the reason why you need to be realistic in how you want to do the project. For example, you need to ask yourself a question. How much time will it take for you to collect the necessary data? How much time do you have? And how much time will it take for you to collect data? How, will you need to travel great distances to get the data? So in other words, is it convenient for you to get the data within your geographical location, or you have to travel great distances in order for you to get the data you're looking for? Will you need expensive equipment? Some researchers, instead of just going for a simpler research and really conveniently doing it and finishing it in good time, sometimes they need expensive equipment. You can imagine if you are working in a forensic space. I was just listening to, I think it's Kolofelo, maybe not, talking about the forensic evidence. So it might as well be that, it's easier to do, or it might be complex. Now, look at that and decide for yourself. Will you need expensive equipment? If yes, how would you afford it? If not, perhaps you relook at your choice. Will the project require knowledge and skills that is far beyond those you currently have? So in other words, look at yourself and say, how much knowledge do I have, and how much knowledge will I be able to afford to augment the knowledge and skills that I already have? Because it might as well be that you may have to pay for such knowledge and for such skills to be available for you. For example, when you talk to some statistician, because you need some statistical analysis, they may or may not require some kind of payment, or forensic analysts who can also make sense of the kind of stuff that is given. So just be mindful of that. And most research problems are too large or complex to be solved without subdividing them. So at times, you may find that the research that you have is just too complex and too large. So all you do, you need to subdivide it and say, how do I break it down in such a way that at least it's easier for me to research it, as opposed to just going into a complex, large research project that may actually just consume you and frustrate you at the time when you want to do it. So I thought, let's start with that, just so that we begin a conversation where, when we talk about the reason why you chose the topic and what do you think about the topic yourself, then you are able to relate to it, because this is a journey that you are taking with us, but we need you to be aware of it and to be mindful of it. I see Nombilo, your hand is up. Go ahead, please.
Okay, Prof. While we're still on the topic, as I said that me and my supervisor, we're still busy with the topic, right? So basically,
Yes.
also asking for your advice on this topic. So I sent it my supervisor. Can I please read the topic that I sent it to my supervisor?
Yes,
And
if you don't mind, let's deal with the real topic now, and
yeah, it's
then
fine.
we
We can deal with my
go
topic.
ahead. Go ahead. Then you said you work in the space, right? First of all.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So at least it's the space that you'll be familiar with, and it will be easier for you to formulate some hypotheses because you do have an idea of the space. Okay, go ahead, please.
So the topic that I sent it to my supervisor, it says investigating the impact of environmental factors of forensic evidence, degradation, a case study of public laboratory in eThekwini municipality. That is a topic I chose, and then I said it to my supervisor. And then my supervisor sent the feedback suggesting we change the topic to an assessment.
No, maybe before you get there, maybe before, let's hold it there.
Okay.
Let's deal with what was your original topic, right?
Yes.
Before we come to the supervisor, so that we can see if there is going to be synergy. So
yes,
to me, it sounds very long.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
I like the fact that you've got the location, so you're not looking at the entire South Africa. So you're saying Durban within a eThekwini municipality. You have already demarcated a scope within which you are going to do this, right?
Yes.
So I think that to me is a plus. So it's within eThekwini municipality, but I think when I listen to some of the variables, because remember at some point you need to say, what are you trying to talk to? So if I were to ask you then, or just on the topic itself, and I've taken note of eThekwini and I'm saying credit on that, what are you trying to establish? Because when you say impact, I'm now listening to it and say, what is an impact of what to what?
Okay. Okay, Prof. You said what I'm trying to achieve with this topic, or what?
Yeah,
impact?
what is it? If you were to explain the topic to somebody by reading it, we hear you, and I'm saying it sounds too long. But if I were to say, condense it and tell me what is it that you are trying to establish as your research focus, what would you say you're trying to do?
Basically, the aim of this research is to understand or try to close the gap of the storage and the handling of the evidence that is collected, because I feel like there is a gap in between of transporting and handling the material, and how we store the material, and also the weather, temperature. All of that is to look on all of those gaps.
So who is your and please just make some notes as we speak and as you answer. There's no right or wrong. You're not giving us the right or wrong answers. We just want your understanding.
Yes.
Now, I'm not getting from you as to who is the target of your study. So in other words, when you talk about the storage, the protocols of handling evidence, I'm not hearing who is being investigated here. So that I'm not hearing the target.
It's us forensic investigators, I guess.
Oh, so why don't you say so? Why don't you say because I need that will call in research going forward. We'll talk about it soon. Is a unit of analysis. So in other words, I need to know who in eThekwini are you looking at? Is it the responsibility of the forensic investigators to collect forensic evidence? Is that correct?
Okay, yes.
Is it so? If your focus is going to be on how forensic evidence is collected by forensic investigators within the eThekwini, you are beginning to say you are not going to be talking to forensic investigators in Kuruman, for example. That is not going to be your they are not going to be relevant to the research that you are conducting, isn't it?
Yeah, yes. Okay.
So now you need to indicate, the amongst the forensic investigators within the Durban or the eThekwini municipality. Do you see? Do you get the point?
Yes.
So Johannesburg investigators may or may not be relevant because your focus. Your focus is
to them. Yes.
Yes, your focus. So remember, at the point of sampling, you are now saying, am I relevant to your study? And Nompilo, you say, well, if you are not a forensic if you are a forensic investigator, but you are not eThekwini, you are not in eThekwini, you are not relevant, right?
Yes.
And you must then be a forensic investigator who's handling forensic evidence.
Yes.
So what does the other variable? So I'm trying to say that to me should be your unit of analysis. So unit of analysis means your conclusion and every focus is going to be on based on them.
Yes, yes.
So I can already see you saying, tell me, what are the protocols that applies from the beginning to the end of collection,
Calculating the
analysis,
data,
and
yes.
storage of evidence? So basically now I see you as asking those questions over those different stages of handling and the risks associated with it.
Yes.
So, but then let's go back to your topic. Your topic says the impact. Did you say impact, or am I imagining?
Yes,
Yeah.
I did say impact. I said investigating the impact of environmental factors. So yes, I did say impact.
So you want to see what impact to the environmental factors? What is it that you want to see as a consequence of the impact
Okay.
on the environmental factors?
I also want to see how does environmental factors such as maybe weather condition.
No, we'll
degrade
deal with the examples of environmental factors. But I'm asking the question, the impact. Remember, this is now your topic.
Yes.
If there is an impact, you say the impact on environmental factors on what? So what is impacting on these environmental factors? I'm looking at your variables now. So this is the impact. You want to establish impact on environmental factors of what? Of when what is happening. So there must be some kind of a relationship. I mean, you want impact of something.
Okay.
What is it? What is it that you want to establish how it impacts? Because if you say this is how it impacts environmental factors, or this is how environmental factors impact on. What do they impact on? What is it that is impacted upon by either environmental factors or what else?
Okay. Prof, you also giving me another look now, of which I didn't look much on that, but I'm taking notes of that. So while I was trying to draft this topic, in my mind is like when I was looking at the environmental factors.
Yeah.
As I was saying, I was looking at it on a crime scene.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
If ever maybe we're trying to collect like blood, right?
Yeah.
Maybe the weather condition change. How does that evidence gonna benefit us? Or
now there is your answer. Maybe saying the impact of the environmental evidence. The impact of the environmental factors on the evidence. There's evidence on the other side, isn't it? The quality, the authenticity, or the credibility of the evidence. You see what you are doing? You are saying you are now putting in variables here. You are saying environmental factors impact on what? Evidence.
Okay, yes.
And the impact can either be, it can be so serious and profound that it can actually lead to outcomes that, in your view, are worrisome in terms of the conclusion that the judicial officers can arrive at. For example, so those environmental factors. So in other words, you are now saying, and this is why I was trying to ask you as to what is this impact? Well, the impact sits between two things, right? It sits between environmental factors and evidence, the collection of evidence. Does it make sense?
Yes.
So your question then is, and we are not trying to answer it. We're just trying to see if we understand.
Yeah.
Your question then is, I am going to establish the impact of the environmental factors, insofar as the quality of evidence collection is concerned. Something along those lines, but focusing,
along those lines,
focusing on the forensic investigators in the eThekwini municipality as an example. Do you see what you are doing? If I come to you now, I am going to say, what are the environmental factors and how does the evidence look? So there's evidence on the one side, there's environmental factors on the other side, and you just want to see, and you're asking and you're engaging the forensic investigators on their own understanding of those variables.
Okay, Prof. Oh wow, okay. Yeah.
What does the supervisor say? Let's come back to the supervisor.
No, I feel
hope
like
we want you to understand your own research first, so that even when you interact with the feedback from the supervisor, it shouldn't be overwhelming to you.
yeah, I felt like it is a bit, and somehow I felt like it's a bit out. Okay, let me just go through. Okay, the suggestion, it says an assessment of the chain of the custody as a strategy to document physical evidence in the forensic investigation.
Yeah, the chain of command, yes. So essentially what your supervisor is saying, instead of looking at the impact, because there will be impact, right?
Yes.
He's saying, maybe look at the assessment. So basically look at the process, from beginning to end.
Okay.
And you look at that in the context of how much of that, if you look at your environmental factors, can be influenced in such a way that it can lead to, outcomes that may or may not be desirable. So it's just a rephrasing.
Okay, for like some time I thought, okay, I'm a bit out, but now you make it more clear. That's why I was saying, like, let me ask for like a third person to explain to me. Now you're making more sense that okay, we are not out of your topic. It's just that we are making, because
the difficulty, Nompilo, with impact,
yes,
is that it's going to be very difficult for you to do impact assessment. But when you do an assessment, is better, because then all you're going to do is you're going to look at what is available from the chain of command. Because impact is a very difficult. I would have even pushed you to say, how are you then going to look at impact? That means you need to look at real cases that have been influenced by those environmental factors, the real evidence, and you see where you are going with it. You are now going to have to look at the cases, the actual physical cases, and you are going to look, because you can't say impact just from a theoretical point of view. You need to say there are cases such as this that fell off because the evidence was already contaminated by the fact that there were environmental factors. Does it make sense? However, if you then do assessment, you are simply saying, if there's blood and it starts raining, what are the protocols? What is the chain of command? What do you need to do to secure the what do you call it? Is it the scene of crime, or what do you call it?
Yeah, crime scene, yes.
Crime scene. So you need to say it's raining. This is the rainy season. An accident happened. Now you want to, what are the protocols? So you're assessing such situation. But if you say it's an impact, that then means you're going to look at the decisions that were taken as a result of lack of evidence, forensic evidence, which was as a result of what you call environmental factors. So it is given that environmental factors will have an influence over evidence collection. Does it make sense? But if you say it's an impact, then it changes the meaning. In research, words have profound meaning.
Okay.
And then I'm going to say impact assessment. Now you need to go read literature on impact assessment. So it's not just assessment, but it's an assessment that has got impact in it. Now, impact assessment is a technical word that says you are now going to conduct an impact assessment. Now you need to be coming with real environmental factors, situations that have really influenced.
Okay, yes.
It does make sense. Is it making sense?
Yeah, it does. Honestly, it does. Because for a moment, I thought maybe I'm out. Because he did say that my topic is a bit wild for me for now.
Yes.
So he's trying to make it more simpler and easier than the Because I thought maybe is it because of investigating or on what, on forensic evidence or what? Like I was a bit confused when I got that
Yeah.
feedback. But now things are more clear, and I have a better understanding that my topic and his topic that he sends, actually they are aligning.
He has aligned your topic, but he has actually made it more easier for you to then
Yes.
say, rather look at the chain of command and assess whether each one of those processes have got the risk that can be influence. And I'm using the word influence. I'm not using the word impact. That can
Yes.
influence the collection of evidence. So you can even go to an extent of saying at the collection of evidence, at the analysis of evidence, because you are saying these environmental factors apply at different stages of your chain of command. So in other words, you're saying, I am at the collection. So you collected everything okay. But then you are saying it's not just collection from environmental factors point of view, it's about the transportation. How do you transport evidence? And the evidence will differ. What kind of evidence are we talking about? Again, you might find that what you need to do further, Nompilo, is to reduce what kind of evidence would you like to focus on? Because
Yes, because
evidence
he
will
also
differ as well, isn't it?
advised that maybe at least I list 3 or 5, a maximum at least of 5 that we're gonna look at. We can't just look at anything that says
Is it the supervisor who's advising you?
my supervisor.
Yes. Do you see what we are aligned with the supervisor? Did you hear
Yes,
that?
yes,
We are saying instead of looking at forensic evidence in totality, maybe you need to say chain of command in a particular, focusing within a particular. So now you are what? You are specific. Because I would imagine maybe the handling of blood may not necessarily be the same as forensic when you handle cartridges, whatever. I mean, you would know better. So
yeah,
perhaps you've got a particular, so you can identify a specific area that you want to focus on
focus
for
on it.
forensic. So you'll have protocol for each of those different areas, or a chain of command from each of all those different areas. Does it make sense?
It does make sense, because to add on some of the things that you just said, just covered his suggestion for my problem statement, because he said I must just look at the lack of training, the lack of proper resources to collect,
Yeah.
the poor of the management, the poor crime scene management, and how they handle the evidence while collecting it, all of that. So I just think that you just also covered that also, Prof.
Oh, thank you very much. Please pass our regards to your supervisor. But
Yeah.
no, but it's important for you, Nompilo, to then say, instead of looking at everything else that forensic investigators
Yes.
do, maybe let me limit it. It's very important to do scope limitation, to say, let me limit it to 1 or 2 aspects so that I follow those aspects from beginning to end. If you say there's a shortage of tools or equipment, maybe it's equipment to do what, So at least if there's no training, maybe it's training for storage, maybe it's capacity for the people who are supposed to store,
Who
or
are
there's no
collecting, yes.
So at least you've got one line that connects your study.
Yes. Yo, I'm so glad, Prof. I'm so glad.
Oh, we're glad. We are the ones who are glad that we found each other on this. So hopefully now it makes sense. So if you just say forensic investigator, again, you're going to find that there is a lot that forensic investigators are doing. Now, if I start asking you about cartridges, you say, no, but I was not focusing on cartridges.
That, yeah.
Now I say, but what about liquid? Is that no, I was not focusing. So then be specific. What are you going to be focusing on? Now, that is going to be your golden thread. So you can then interview your colleagues and say, guys, let's talk about how we handle blood. And here are the environmental factors. Those environmental factors you are referring to should then be linking to blood handling of
Yes.
how do we handle it? What kind of equipment should we have? Do we have sufficient equipment in that regard? Yeah, no. How do we transport it? How do we store it? You know, if we want to access it over time, how do we then retrieve it? You know, all those are your protocols that you either going to know about or you don't know about. Now, along the way, you can ask people similar questions. Are you trained on this? Do you know how to handle it? Do you know how to preserve it? Do you know how to retrieve it? You know, if there is, and then where there are gaps, what do you do as a researcher? You note those gaps.
Yes.
Done. So we are done with your study. Nompilo. That makes sense.
We just collected data on how I'm going to collect data. The question that I will ask.
We'll get to that, but at least we are sorting out the topic to some extent.
Yes, Prof, I just want to thank you. Thank you so much for making things more simpler for me also, and for making me see that actually I'm aligning with my supervisor. Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome. Please don't stop participating because we might have other situations as well. And I hope as we are dealing with you, and thank you for really sharing your own situation, because it's this is what we prefer. We prefer to work with something that is real, not abstract, because then there is no much value if we talk about abstract things that we are dealing with. Let me go back to, was it Philip? Philip, as I was talking to Nompilo, I was thinking about you. I'm not sure whether you are the one who was talking very big words about Brazil and South Africa and the indigenous people. Are you the one?
Yes, I'm the one.
Are you still sticking to your plan?
I think when I was listening now, how you kind of was breaking down for Nompilo, I was actually thinking a little bit much more deeper also from my side, because maybe let me share the thinking that I was having when I came up with the topic, because really the main idea, I think the first part of the variable on my side is that I wanted to do like a comparison between the two countries. And the second aspect of it, I also
just there. Let's just stop there a little bit, Philip. I'm not, please don't change your topic, but I want you to think, as you did the right thing to say. I was thinking about it. How do you envisage doing a comparative analysis between South Africa and Brazil? In other words, how are you going to the tool that you're going to use for that?
Okay, so it's really more focused. So it's more like a desktop kind of review, and I will qualify it why on my side, because the reasoning or the rationale is that I wanted to explore the constitutional provisions that are available between the two countries that addresses issues around environment.
Just hold it there.
Yeah.
You are now going to do a desktop, so that basically is not going to be, you're going to look at South Africa and Brazil. What are there some similarities between South Africa and Brazil insofar as the indigenous communities are concerned?
Correct. Both we share the same constitutional provision in terms of access. So when you look at South Africa, we have Section 24 of the Constitution that guarantees everyone's right to environmental.
No. Let's talk about indigenous community, because that's what I'm asking. I'm saying, I'm not talking about just the constitutionalities of the country. I'm saying in terms of the indigenous community, what are the similarities? Because remember, when you define indigenous communities, it's something else.
Yeah.
So is there any similarities between Brazil and South Africa insofar as indigenous communities are concerned? I'm not aware of it.
Actually,
remember, a comparative analysis may also talk to comparing either similar things or dissimilar things.
Yeah. I hear what you say, because I think one of the things based on my research
Yes.
between just the indigenous territories between South Africa and Brazil.
Yes.
It's what they are basically facing around not fully being participating in environmental kind of decision making, although the law is there between the two countries. And then the other similarities is also the dominance.
But let's talk about the indigenous community. I'm saying is in South Africa and in Brazil, if we were just to limit, because these are variables that you are going to have to research.
Yeah.
If you are then saying to a South African indigenous community, and you say to a Brazilian indigenous community, in your view, and there's no right or wrong, are we talking about similar, or in Brazil it could mean something completely different? Like when you say Aboriginals in Australia and New Zealand and this other, is it what we are talking about? And in South Africa, I think you are almost bordering on going to the Khoi and the San. Is it what you are talking about?
No, I hear what we are asking. No, not necessarily the case.
Okay.
Because in South Africa, I was looking at like a broader definition of communities, mostly like your rural kind of communities.
Okay, so maybe go that route. You know, maybe be specific and use a typical. For example, if you say rural area, a rural area in South Africa is surely not going to be the same as the rural area in Brazil, but they may have some kind of similar principles that you can use as a basis.
Correct.
Now, again, if you say indigenous, just be able to say, what is the definition of indigenous communities internationally using literature, but then say, for you as Philip, what does indigenous mean? Because otherwise we will be bringing to you indigenous communities and say, no, but I didn't mean this bush, what do they call them? The Khoisans coming from the Kalahari. These are not the ones that I'm focusing on. Then the Brazilian will also have, because Brazil will have quite a lot of such communities, given its diverse nature as a country and the size, isn't it?
Correct.
So let's come back then to the constitutionalism. What is it that you are looking at? Because it's very broad, and again you say comparative analysis. Now there's communities. Now there's a provision in law. Which part of the Constitution are you talking about in South Africa, as it will be also in Brazil?
So in South Africa, the only section I'm looking at in our Constitution is Section 24, which provides the rights to environment harmful, not to be exposed to any harmful environment. And then in the Brazilian context, I'm looking at their constitution provision under Article 225, which establishes environmental protection as a fundamental right for
environmental protection. Environmental protection in the indigenous communities is protected by law. And what is the situation in South Africa for, let's say, the rural communities? Do they have the environmental provisions that protect them or not?
Our South African one, it says all. So I'm assuming that, yes, they do. They are protected.
Say article of the Brazilian law?
So the Brazilian one, it's Article 225 of their 1988 Constitution, which explicitly recognize indigenous people, their culture autonomy, and their rights to traditional land as part of establishing the environmental protection as a fundamental right. Whereas in South Africa, we are looking at Section 24, which guarantees everyone's right to an environment that is not harmful to their health, well-being, and protects the benefits in the presence of the future generation. So I'm doing the comparison between those two, and then really trying to explore whether this definition of indigenous communities and rural communities, are they really fundamentally, benefiting from these rights or these provisions?
I see. But remember also, Philip, as much as I hear you, it's also very important to define concepts in the way that we will all be on the same page. So in other words,
Okay.
I am saying indigenous community. I don't have a problem if you say maybe you are focusing your indigenous community, you are looking at in South Africa, maybe rural communities, whatever.
Yes,
And
yes, correct.
in Brazil, they are looking at perhaps indigenous in a different context. That's very important. It might be that you are not necessarily, but you are focusing on the sufficiency.
Yes.
Okay, please go ahead.
Actually, in Brazil, I've actually limited it to looking at indigenous communities in the Amazon.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But it's going to be, but the kind of evidence that you are going to collect is going to be documentary evidence.
Yes, correct.
Is it both for South Africa and for Brazil?
Correct.
Why Brazil, if I may ask? Because Brazil, and now you said something very important, because you need to add that in your topic to say, with particular reference to Amazon. Why? Because Brazil is a country.
Yeah, correct.
And South Africa is a country.
Correct.
So when you say a specific reference to Amazon, what have you done? You have narrowed your search to a particular community.
Yes.
And so is South Africa, because if you say South Africa, as soon as you cross the border, everywhere in South Africa is South Africa, and maybe you don't mean everywhere in South Africa.
Correct.
Okay. Why Brazil, if I may ask, and Amazon in particular?
It's particular linked to also my work. So I'm currently designing a South-to-South program between South Africa and Brazil.
Oh, okay.
Specific, although it's not focusing on environmental racism, but it's one of the factors as part of my interview process with some Brazilian communities. And then I became very much interested in it on my side. Yeah, I do have some link between the two countries.
No, I'm glad. So tell me, why then are you talking about environmental racism? Where does that come from? And I'm not saying it's wrong. It's just for purpose of us being able to relate to your discussion better.
Okay, so I'll put it in a very layman's term. Based on my conversation. So the challenge that Brazilian communities, specifically in this region of the Amazon, based on the fact that their rights of occupancy is not recognized because they come from like slavery. So one of the biggest issues that they are struggling with is that they've been occupying a particular piece of land for like over 50 years from their side. But even in the period of 50 years, they are not, the state hasn't fully recognized them, giving them the rights to land so that they can fully utilize the land to their own benefit. But irrespective, there are major companies that they are coming in, which is why now the kind of a case it's similar to South Africa, where you see like your big mining industries coming on board based on the fact that they are going to be contributing economically to the broader country. They are actually, in the Brazilian context, specifically in the Amazon, government is actually recognizing those industries more than the occupants that have been there. So these communities now, they are being either reallocated to another area so that the land that they've been occupying for 50 years now is being utilized for like mining industries, which impacts on their health and all these other issues. So I'm using that kind of a study on their side and say in South Africa, we do have similar kind of case law in other areas like that are affected by mining communities, and how government, the constitution doesn't protect citizens who are like supposed to be, part of the land distribution component.
Okay, yeah, but just educate me a bit on the environmental racism? Because I do hear injustice, a lot of it.
Yes.
But why do you then choose to go for racism, environmental racism?
So
The choice of that.
The choice of the word is how they are perceiving this level of injustice and exclusion based on the fact that they are not the originals of the Brazil, because they come from different countries. So in relation to the color of their skin, where they are coming from, because they don't even know where they are coming from, majority of them, they are being kind of excluded.
So the protection that you are talking about, the article that you are referring to, does not protect them. Is that what you are advancing?
Correct.
So it protects the Brazilians in the main, but is not, when it comes to them, it doesn't seem to apply.
Correct, because they are not like Brazilian original citizens.
Oh, I see. So but isn't that, is it racism or is it injustice? I mean, there might be semantics there, but I'm very curious as a researcher on terms that we are using.
Yeah.
So is it racism, or is it there some injustice and discrimination? I don't know. I mean, racism means something else to me. Perhaps it means something different to you. I mean, we all have different understanding. What do you think it is?
So
they have been done injustice.
To be honest with you, as much as I frame it as racism, which is one of the big questions on my side, because I want to fully define it first.
Okay.
Also on my side, so that's a big task that I need to do.
So you are willing to look at the
Yes.
environmental situation, whether it's racism or it's injustice.
Correct.
But there is an element of racism that applies in Brazil that you think may have some kind of resemblance with South Africa.
Correct.
So how do you then relate this to South Africa, if I may ask, in, say, maybe in rural communities?
So in the rural communities, my angle is that there are still rural communities that face disproportionate exposure to environmental hazard. Because I'm using predominantly by the fact that because I need to kind of explore some of the case laws that are available on our side, specifically from areas that have been kind of taken over by the mining industries because of...
but you see, just hold it there.
Yeah.
Just hold it. When you compare the situation of the environmental factors, I think like we were talking to Nompilo earlier, then you need to zoom into a particular situation. Because, for example, I think you're more in the economic. It looks like when you are talking about the Amazon, you talk about companies. And when you come to South Africa, you talk about mining. Shouldn't you rather then look at it so that you're talking about the comparative analysis, but looking at a particular industry, for example?
Good. Yeah.
So in other words, you can't then say to South Africa, rural communities, they've been moved away because there was mining that needed to take place. But then you go to Amazon, you say no, because maybe a telecommunication company wanted to set up their towers there and so on and so on.
Correct.
Then the comparison seems to be moving around quite a... So why don't you then look at how is it then that the Amazon are treated at a particular time and the South Africans are treated at a particular time, but connecting them through some kind of a similar business?
Correct. No, it makes more sense what we are saying now.
That makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So then you take the Amazon, and maybe in South Africa you take a particular community. There might be a community that got displaced, or that got environmentally, discriminated against, or they suffered environmental injustice, depending on what your definition is going to be. And you say, the situation that you are seeing in Brazil and the situation that you are seeing in South Africa, maybe there are some similarities, but of course there might also be some differences as you look at it. Then in that case, you are almost close to comparing, the normal adage, the popular adage, apples with apples. And then you are looking at the provisions in law. That what does the provision in law says insofar as the protection of these communities? And is it sufficient for South Africa? Is it insufficient? Is it sufficient for Brazil? Is it insufficient? Or is it there on paper, but maybe implementation is something else? You see, you are building a solid argument in that direction. Does it make sense?
It makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. And it does pull things together.
We're going to keep on talking about all these issues. What I find your study and Nompilo's study interesting now is that for some reason there seems to be some synergy in that you are looking at environmental factors.
Yeah, correct.
Although maybe the variables are, she comes from an angle where it's about the handling, the transportation, the storage. But I think you're also saying I come from environmental factors insofar as protection of the communities are concerned. And for me, the definition of those communities is what you need to work around, because I don't know what you do define a community that is Amazon when you compare it with a community in Pilgrim's Rest in Mpumalanga, for example, or Kuruman, Katu in Kuruman, in a mining community where people get moved around. Yet there were Section 24 in the Constitution, and there was an Article 22 Mamang in Brazil, but yet people still had to move. Now, the irony of it, and this is where maybe you want to add some more spice to your research, is that the irony of it is that these seems to be communities that are predominantly black in South Africa as it is in Brazil. And that's why perhaps you want to explore the racism element as it links to the economic situation that accrue at that time.
Correct.
Now, the question will be, if you start raising the racism thing discussion, which is not wrong, the question will be, in both South Africa and both Brazil, is there no community that may not necessarily be white and indigenous? I mean, that may not be black and indigenous. Is there such a community that also suffered that or not? If not, then you've got a very good reason and claim to say there is an element of racism, or it doesn't have to be conclusive, but you can raise it as an observation as you deal with your own comparative analysis.
No, thank you very much for that aspect, because I actually haven't explored it on my side, because you are quite right that there might be another community of another race, irrespective of being black, which have been also suffered the same kind of racism definition on our side that I might need to take into cognizance of it.
No problem. But you may then also argue that in the main, maybe those that suffer are this. There's nothing wrong in you saying that if that's what's coming out of your study. You know, you can then still say, yes, maybe there might have been, but you know, the predominantly from what you are seeing, literature-wise, decisions that have been made, case studies, you know, it looks like these communities are predominantly black, and therefore you are raising a question to say, if I am interested in pursuing this study, maybe I can pursue that further. You know?
Perfect.
Great.
Thank you very much, Prof, for this. I think it makes much more clearer on my side. That definitely I will take some of these recommendations that you have proposed now.
No problem, my brother. But what you need to then know is that a proposal gets improved as and when you keep on reading more, engaging more, because at the end of the day, you want something that for your own research you are able to stand for it, understand it, and you are going to have to be the one doing it and defending it. But you are not looking for the right or wrong answers. You're just putting out science out there, facts out there, you know, to say these are the facts that I've established. This is what is happening. Let's debate, you know.
Correct.
All right. No,
thank you so much.
No, you're welcome, Philip. I'm glad that at least both you and Nompilo were not objecting to us engaging you on this. So
not a problem.
Looks like we're on the right track so far.
Yes.
I'm impressed with your topics, all of you. So that is the reason why I'm engaging you today. Let's look at the topic, because if the topic is well structured, you know, as we move on, we will find each other, and it's just gonna be much more easier to engage. Is there any question from some of you on this platform that you've been listening to us talking to the two participants? Oh, okay, I see. Jessup, you've got your hand up. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Professor. I must tell you, listening to my colleagues there, it seems somewhat overwhelming because it's the first time, you know, we're approaching a research, in my case, a dissertation. Now, I've put together a research topic, but listening to what you have advised and from your guidance, I think maybe my topic might be a bit overbroad. And the reason why I want to mention this to you is perhaps to get your guidance.
Okay.
I've set out in my research topic that the research intended to examine the statutory and procedural framework governing the transfer of immovable property from deceased estates and trusts in South Africa, and it intended to focus on the complex interplay between the Administration of Estates Act and the Deeds Registries Act. I set it out with a problem statement saying that there is a bottleneck in the master's office, which creates, you know, with their backlog and the challenges that the master's offices have, which impacts on the effective and efficient transfer of property to the respective heirs and beneficiaries. But I've also included, apart from the master's office, I've set out challenges not just from the master's office, but with, for example, dysfunctional municipalities. I have found that oftentimes, because the municipalities fail to implement proper debt control and credit control policies, I have many clients that are elderly people that come from rural areas.
But wait, Jessup, wait. Let's start with the topic, because it's given that the master's office is such a, on its own, it's a subject of study, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes.
So let's start there. So you want to focus on the procedural. There was something you're raising. So I couldn't write everything down as you're speaking. But you're talking about the procedural aspects of the transfers of immovable property.
Yes.
So let's talk about that. So the procedure for transfer of immovable property to somebody who's, you know, who's what is the word you used?
Let's call them indigent or from a disadvantaged background, perhaps.
Yeah, let's just take you. Let's say you are an attorney, so you want to transfer and you know, the asset of, you know, an indigent parents to that person because it's an inheritance.
Correct.
And you're saying there's a procedure for that, isn't it?
There is that's correct, yes.
So what is it that you want to investigate just at the procedure level? Let's just hold it there.
All right.
What is your curiosity there?
Well, the challenge that I have in that instance is the delays that we're having from the master's office, number one, and the situation where something has got to be done to enable us to be able to assist these individuals to transfer these properties, because the cost factor is very high, and perhaps
but I'm in agreement with you, because everything else then falls flat because of that. But I'm asking you now, there is a procedure, so there's an inefficiencies in the master's office which impact on your business, right?
Yes.
What are you investigating there? Because I mean, as an attorney, you are familiar with the process, but it affects you because there is not a procedure that is a problem, or is it?
Well, it's more the delays more than anything else. The inability of the master's office to timeously respond to the queries. One, there is also the other aspect is that. So
the point I'm trying to raise with you is, it looks like you may want to focus on that, because the problem is not the transfer of the immovable property the indigent. It's not, that is not where the problem is, isn't it?
Right. Correct.
Your
correct.
study, yeah, your study seems to say here is a procedure that is set clear and straightforward, right? So
Right.
as an
Okay.
attorney, you would know what that procedure entails. Now, if you are confronted with an indigent, you can assist that person in just about 3 days, 2 days, whatever the time is, because the
Yes.
procedure would say. But you are not able to
Right.
do that, as timelessly as you want to. Now, I'm saying,
Yes.
shouldn't your study then be different? That you are looking at how is it then that the master's office impact on this procedure that is set? Because that's there's a problem here. Remember, your research is about identifying and solving a problem. The problem is not the
Yes.
indigent. The problem is not the procedure. The problem is there are some systemic and structural challenges that you seem to go through when it comes to
Correct.
dealing with the master's office. Isn't that where the problem
master's
is?
office. That is correct. That is correct.
So I'm saying, therefore, maybe your research needs to be formulated in you looking at where the problem is, which then the problem naturally will affect you and your clients and everybody else.
Okay.
I hope I'm making sense to you.
No, it makes sense. It's narrowing it down, Professor. The other aspect. So when I put in my topic outline, basically, am I correct? Then it would seem overbroad, because I've also included the bottlenecks and the issues that I have experienced with municipalities, because many rural areas, people have lived and they've passed on from grandfather to son, and what has happened is that when we are in the process of transferring property, the other problem that we have, apart from the master's office, is that when you apply, for example, a water clearance certificate, you have a district municipality saying they owe us 80,000 and 100,000, and these people don't have the money. As a result, we are not in a position to effect transfer of that property because they just don't have the money. So the entire estate comes to a standstill. And I was looking at research as to whether there could be a universal approach, for example, digitizing or in a manner where the master's office, the municipalities all have a central sort of system where something could be done to alleviate this issue, because the problems are so complex. Municipalities do not implement a proper credit control policy, as a result of which many people in the rural areas are living and they don't know that we've got to pay for water, we've got to do, and municipalities are not now they're not implementing this. So my concern is that something that one can consider? Because, or are we to say that, look, that's the fault on the part of the municipality, but it's impacting, it's having a snowball effect on the manner in which we want to effect transfer, and then the master's office obviously will not be able. So there's challenges that's cumulative in effecting transfer with these entities, so to speak.
Yes, I hear you. Now let's then go back and check this other element, because these are variables. And remember, if you build too many of them, each one of them, when you do research, should receive some kind of enough data collection and analysis. So I hear you. Now let's then link it back to the indigent. These are as a consequences all this you're saying. The municipalities are unable and their own policies insofar as protecting the indigent are concerned. But how does this then talk back to your point on the transfer? Because it's still about really making sure that there is a transfer of But I hear you talking about immovable property. Is there a particular reason why you want immovable property?
Particularly because I'm now dealing more with conveyancing matters and estates.
Oh, okay. So that's where your interest is.
That's right. You see, Professor, I come from more of a criminal background. I dealt with a lot of anti-apartheid cases, dealing with assisting with families whose family members have been murdered by the old apartheid government. So I was
Okay.
involved in cases where we tried to get justice for these families and closures from the families. I think you'll now know, look, I'm not involved in the matter with the Cradock 4 and so
The
on, but
TRC.
I've
You're not
done,
part of the TRC.
that's right. That's
You're
it,
part
that's
of
it.
the
So I dealt,
TRC legal teams.
no, that's the Foundation for Human Rights. I was part of them dealing with one specific matter where there was a Dr. Hussein Hafiji that was murdered in 1977. And then I was part of the team that dealt with the Timol matter where he was thrown from a 10-story
Oh, yeah.
building
Why?
and so on. And
That was a sad
partly
story.
involved. That's right.
Yeah.
So I was partly involved, but I've moved now to more into the private law space, dealing with estates and conveyancing. I suppose because we're getting older, and I think that my focus has changed a bit. Because
Well, we're getting older, and I think we have delivered democracy. No, but
that's right.
Let's come back to this point, and this is very interesting
All right.
background. Thank you very much. What I want to hear now
Thanks,
is
guys.
you look, there are two things that you are raising. It's about the master's
Okay.
office,
Yes.
and I'm saying these are the inefficiencies that are there that you can zoom in and focus on them because they've got impact on the indigent community or individuals. But the second aspect you say is the municipality. Look,
That's
I don't
correct.
think it will be easy if you take all municipalities. Maybe you need to zoom into a specific municipality and interrogate their implementation of that specific policy, right? So that at least you are able to say when it comes to indigent, what happens when there are these delays from the master's office and yet there are immovable property that you are unable to transfer, and in the meantime is accumulating a debt.
Yes.
And therefore their credit control and their credit management is chaotic. So you see you are specifically looking at the interest of the indigent insofar as the different entities are concerned.
Yes.
So you're looking at your municipality, you've got a very
Right.
poor credit control systems. You are a
Right.
master's office, you've got a very poor systems to manage immovable property transfers for the indigent to live a better life. So both of you are contributing to worsening the situation of this, and you're also affecting the business side of my intervention which is social
Yes.
justice, because you're giving social justice to the indigent. Now,
Yes.
you look at what is weak about the municipality insofar as those debt issues are concerned, and how much of that is as a result of the of the master's office incompetency or some inefficiencies. You see, then you are tying together two
Right.
entities, powerful entities that have got a way
Right.
that they can liberate the poor people in a particular community. So
Yes.
for me, I'm saying you narrow it down to say what is at the center is your immovable property transfers to an indigent.
Right.
That's what you are looking at, but it must be an indigent
Yes.
in a particular context. Then you say what is the role of the
Okay.
municipality and what is the role of the masters in addressing that transfer of the immovable property aspect, because it's part of your expertise as a lawyer, that this is what you want to do. And if the systems
Yes.
and the structures and everything else is good, you will be able to
Right.
do a lot more. And
Yes.
it's a one municipality, but you are able to say this situation is definitely not unique to South Africa. I mean, to the area that you are in. This is where the concept of extrapolation comes in, where we say, what do you see in is it Lady Smith? You said
Lady Smith, the Alfred Duma municipality.
what do you see in Lady
Utukela.
Smith? What do you see in Utukela may be similar to what is there in Polokwane, might be applicable in Nelspruit, might be applicable in the Western Cape, and so, because the master's office, the machinery it's a
Right.
national machinery, and once it stops functioning, it means you are able to say this is the situation here in Utukela, but you are
Right.
more likely to say this situation is not unique for this, because the masters and the dysfunctionality of municipalities is well documented in the country. So basically, you'll then be saying, perhaps this is an area that, so your recommendation is both for the masters in jacking up their systems, their structures, and also to the municipalities in relation to the indigent. So what are you addressing municipalities on? Implementation of the indigent policies. What are you addressing the master's office on the policies as it relates to and how it affects the indigent insofar as the transfer of immovable assets are concerned? And that can then be used for other examples beyond what you are using as an example. Does it make sense?
Yes, it does. It does, Professor, because I also realize that there are people, I've had other instances. For example, you have an elderly person and she now decides, I want to transfer this property to my daughter, for example. But she's been considered as an indigent. Now this indigent person has they receive a concession. Let's call it that, a concession from the municipality. They pay a lower rate to the municipality. However, she's now an elderly person. She might have an illness and she wants to transfer this property to the child. And the municipality says, no, hold on. She was indigent, but now that she's transferring this property, she for example, in the case where she wants to sell the property to the child, the municipality says, well, we're now going to calculate what she would have normally paid. And to me, that's very prejudicial. You see, so there's also that issue.
Yeah, but you see, that to me, Jesop, is you now saying, you now also looking into the, I don't know whether it will be the policy, or the legislation in relation to that. And obviously, you want to make some suggestion, because from what you are saying is that it doesn't sound right. You don't agree. You seem to say you don't agree with it, and because you are now doing research, you need to then say what are you suggesting should happen. So in other words, you have to take that. You have to take that situation, problematize it, and say, what do you think about it? So you can actually ask both the indigent person, well, assuming there will be some actual interviews or engagement, you can ask the municipality about it. You can ask people about it and say, what do you think about it? And you as a researcher, remember, one of the responsibilities that you have as a researcher is to also make recommendations. That in such situation where a frail and old indigent person wants to get rid of an asset, so that at least they can have a peace of mind, what do you suggest should happen? And that obviously is going to require you, both as a researcher but also as a legal person, to then say which provision in law are you addressing, and therefore what do you suggest should happen? Now, that is a recommendation of a solution of a problem, because research solves problems. You do research because here is a problem. You have now looked at it and you have analyzed it. You have really looked at it in depth. You have read about it. You have engaged, around it. And therefore you feel that maybe it's unfair. Maybe it's an injustice. And therefore this is what you are suggesting or recommending. Now, when I pick up your work, it might be picked up globally and in some community, because when you read, because you're going to do literature review, it might be that the same situation, happens elsewhere, but maybe the solution is there in other jurisdictions. So all you might end up with is, why don't you apply what this jurisdiction applies? Or why don't you do what this other country has done? Or why don't, if nobody has done it, you are then, saying, I'm suggesting this. What are you doing? It's groundbreaking. Isn't that what research does? So you are actually saying, I am not aware of anywhere in the world where this has happened. And therefore, your suggestion and your recommendation is first of its kind. And that then brings about a new way of looking at things. And remember, that is how you develop your expertise as well. Because now we will come to you and say, how do you foresee us doing that? Now you then have to lead that process of change. And that's what research is all about. So now you formulate a solution, the solution for which you are willing to demonstrate. Now, if you've got 200 plus municipalities and it's say all of them are applying the same principle for which you are challenging. So the natural process is for you to influence the policy and the policy to say, maybe we need to solve this, and this is how we're going to solve it, because amongst others, and I'm sure some of you, Philip, will agree,
Yes.
is that we are trying as a country to come up with the pro-poor policies.
Correct, correct.
So if that is a pro-poor suggestion, you are saying this does not advance the pro-poor policy if you've got an old, frail person who has worked so hard up to this point, and at a time when they want to transfer the property, these are the challenges. What are you doing? You're actually challenging the policy, drafters and people to re-look on how they engage this. So you've got an opportunity there to solve or to bring to the surface the challenges of those entities, as I said. So that's what you do. So and what impresses me is when you say, all of you are saying we work in this space, so it makes it easier for you to relate to that space, because then it's cases that you can sort of relate to for an experience that is brilliant.
Okay, because Professor, we look, it's we are dealing with now old and frail people in many instances, and when we had the transformation from 94 to now, these people were younger then, and now they are much older. The challenges and the difficulties that they have, and we're not talking about the wealthy people, and they can afford the transfer, that will go in the normal process. I'm concerned about the poor people, the people from the rural areas. Those, it's heartbreaking when I sit in front of an elderly woman who's got her children, and it's very difficult when you have to say to her, Ma, I'm trying my best to assist you, but the municipality is insisting on so much. If we can't do this, there is a problem with the master's office. They won't allow these transfers to take place and things like that. So these are the things that, and I appreciate so much you giving me this guidance, because now it helps me to narrow down my research topic, so to speak. I now feel more focused, because when I thought about this, I think now it was overbroad, because I spoke of in my research topic, I mentioned the SARS, and I mentioned trusts, and I mentioned
all you do, Joseph, and there's already a suggestion for you that it becomes an advocacy tool for future transformation, right? And I agree with that. All you are doing now is that in the problem statement, all these issues you are raising, you put them in there. So in other words, you explain indigent the experiences that you go through, because you see, you've got the right to problematize it from your experience, to say old people, approach attorneys and this is what happened. So now you say, now you have given us the background, the context of the problem, and you say, this is what I think, my focus of my research is going to be. So it's a done deal. You've got a very focused research that is informed by you wanting to solve the problem of the indigent people, old people, and so on. So you can raise those issues in your problem statement or in the background, in your introduction, that, this is what is happening. As a researcher now, you say, from a research point of view, we see these people every day, we interact with these people every day, and we see what they're going through. So as Philip is saying, then you are beginning an advocacy, for them. But you are doing it in such a way that it's a research document that will be scientific, and we will all read it and we say, yes. I mean, it starts like that. We want information that is verified, that has gone through a process that we are discussing now, and obviously informed by the realities of the people that you are representing. So I'm 100% sure that it's going to be a very good study, and the outcome of which and the recommendation of which will be something that you may want to pursue beyond just your master's, and maybe you go for LLD, because it sounds to be a very good topic. We need more researchers, by the way, just so that you're not here for a short course. This should be a long course to solve the country's problem. But thank you for indulging us with your
Thank you, Professor. I'm indebted to you and very grateful to you for giving me this guidance. When you take on a LLM dissertation, and I think to myself, am I taking? I want to do this, because for me, it's a way of giving back. It's trying to find a way in which we can help our community, and this is something that goes to the core of who we are, in that sense. And then
I'm
and I
impressed.
find this, every day. So I appreciate so much your guidance, Professor. I'm very grateful.
Please attend to our regular engagement, because we don't want to lose this valuable, important work that all of you are doing. But I see Solomzi would like to say something, and thank you very much, Jessop, for indulging us and sharing your work. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you. Solomzi, please comment. Go ahead, please.
All right, thanks, Prof. No, in actual fact, I was getting anxious because I'm looking at the time, and I thought my topic has not been
ventilated upon. No, look,
yes,
we owe you ventilation. But have you not picked up, as we are talking to the different colleagues of ours on this platform, that maybe you also have one or two things that you can go back and work on a little bit? You haven't picked up anything?
Yes, I did. In fact, I learned a lot, Prof.
Okay. What is itching right now for you before we break? What is it that you think, look, I want this so that if we have to meet again next week, this will not wait?
No, I think it's just on my topic. If I can share with you, so that we go through it together.
Okay. You want us to use the same platform so we can interrogate your topic?
Yes. Okay.
All right. Let's see. In about 2 minutes, just run through it, because otherwise I'll be getting into Godfrey's time. But I think you did say your topic is about overcrowding, right? You're looking at the overcrowding.
Yes, that's correct.
And the what is it? The overcrowding and the rehabilitation. Did you say that?
Yes, the impact of overcrowding on rehabilitation of offenders with regard to risk and need assessment.
With regard to
risk and need assessment.
So you're looking at the impact of overcrowding on rehabilitation. That's quite a lot.
Yes.
So why don't you look at rehabilitation in relation to risk and needs assessment?
No, in actual fact, Prof, it goes further to talk about sentence planning and submission of profile reports to correctional supervision and parole board. So,
Solomzi, can I ask something from you? Can we have a deal that when we meet again next meeting, we focus on your conversation, on your topic? Will that be too late? I don't want us to rush through what you're saying, because I've got a few questions to ask you, and I think it might be helpful if we sitting and we talking about it, so that everybody else on this platform can also add to it. I'm just worried now that I've got questions because it's impact, it's overcrowding, then you've got rehabilitation program, and then you've got needs, risk and needs analysis. Already I'm picking up in offenders. I'm picking up a lot of variables.
Yes.
And I don't want you to leave the platform more confused.
Okay.
So
that will be on the 15th of April.
That will be?
Our next session will be on the 15th of April.
Is it? No, Godfrey, where do you get that from? Godfrey, when is our next session? He will talk to that. Is that the 16th of April?
15.
1-5?
Yes.
Oh. I'm not sure, but let's hear from Godfrey will confirm that. But we can go through it, use what you've just heard now, build it up, and then when we meet again, we just deal with it as well. There's a question quickly that is being asked, maybe that can also be relevant to you, Solomzi. We will come back to you, and please remind us when we are on the platform. I'm not sure about the 15th of April, but Godfrey will address that. The next question is, how long is a research problem? Is it a page or two? Well, look, I think a page should be enough, because when you give a problem, you're just explaining what is the problem that you are trying to address. So for me, how long is the research problem is as long as you would want to put it yourself. Because, just listening to earlier what Jesop was saying is, I see this is the problem, municipality, indigent people, and the masters. So he can write as long as a page. He can write as short as a paragraph, maybe 2 paragraphs. So it's just you really formulating the problem in the way that you understand it. I wouldn't want to, but you always can check with your supervisor as well, because in some instances, they will guide you to say, we want you to write a problem statement for about half a page, full page, 2 pages. So it doesn't really help much, Nombilo, to talk about the pages. If you can, that your supervisor will be able to guide you very easily, because it differs from area to area, field to field, supervisor to supervisor. If it was me, I would just say, once you have captured the problem in the best way possible, whether it's a half page, whether it's a full page, whether it's 2 pages, at least you would give me a problem. But 2 pages for a problem, if it's just your view of the problem, sound long. But again, it's relative. I hope I did not confuse you much there.
Thank you, Prof.